What does it take to be a successful entrepreneur? A dangerous amount of coffee and a ton of grit. My name is Jason Tracy, and every week I interview business leaders to share their stories, life lessons, failures, and advice with you. Welcome to Coffee and Grit. What is up? What is up? What is up? Welcome back to another episode of Coffee and Grit. It's Jason Tracy back for another episode. We've got Cheryl Wasilewski in the studio today, and super excited. It's really cool bringing in people that you've got a chance to work with and do some collaboration with. And I'm going to take this back a second, because if you're in business right now, a lot of times you look at people that are doing similar things as you, and you might be guarded and think like you can't talk to them or build relationships with them, or you maybe are a little bit competitive. And what I found is, for me, sales, I feel like sales is so easy, we make it so hard. And I'm on this mission to help people make sales more intuitive, more natural, and most importantly, done in that servant mindset of taking care of people, and that you're not trying to force sales on people. And so for me, as I've went out and I've met other sales and marketing consultants that are out there, I don't look at them necessarily as competitors. I look for the people that have a lot of the aligned same values and thought processes, because I know I'm not everybody's cup of tea. And I know in order to carry a mission through, it really takes a whole bunch of us, right? And it takes a village, so to speak. And so I love going out there and building relationships. And I got to meet Cheryl through the chamber, through marketing mashups. We were pulled in and aligned. And it's funny because even starting out the marketing mashup, it started off as a panel, like a panel discussion. Yep. And I remember Julianne at the chamber was like, there are some people that don't want to be on this because they look at the people that are on the panel with them as their competitors. And it was like, for me, I look at it as, again, more relationships and more building. And so as you're out there, just take that little tip of advice that, look for opportunities that you can, because there's collaborations and there's ways that you can really combine forces and help each other. So with that, Cheryl, welcome to the studio.
Thank you. I'm excited to be on Coffee and Grit. It's like, this is like awesome. I know people are kind of shouldn't say dying to get in here. That's a different business. But people are like lining up though. So good. Kudos to you.
Thank you. Yeah. It's been so exciting. It's been like the compound effect. Mm-hmm. And now that this episode like 154, and so many past guests are referring their friends or their family, friends, people that they know that would be good on the show, or people that are connected with those people have listened to the show and they're reaching out to me, or just I've been so active lately hitting events. We were both at the Business Expo last week.
That's right.
And there's 80 different business owners there.
That's right.
You're meeting so many people. And it's like the fire hose, and you're meeting, because everybody has this story, and it's just so important. I love meeting people and helping them tell their story. And so we're booked out till June, and I'm like trying to put the brakes on, but it's so hard because I get so excited when I meet cool people. It's like, oh, let's have you on Coffee and Grit.
This. Yeah.
And we've been scheduled out since
a while ago. Yeah. We met up, and you were booked pretty much. And then I wanted to leave my February open I was hoping to go down to Florida for the month, and I only went down for a week. So anyway, but that's okay, so thank you. This has been great.
My pleasure. I've been looking forward to it. It's been the countdown. I swear it's probably like December.
Yeah, I think so. Right.
Well, it had to have been, because that was around the time that we were doing the webinars together.
Right. Yeah. So I think, we met because I wanted to. Yeah, I think I met and said, hey, got a great idea. Want to join me on some webinars? And then that led into this. And it was here we are.
Absolutely.
Kind of fun.
So tell me a little bit about your business and how you got started.
Yeah, how I got started. Wow. So well, I'm going to go back because my background. So first of all, I kind of a funny story. So I was going to school, out of college, went to, or out of high school, went to college, and couldn't decide what I wanted to do. First one, maybe be a teacher, because I thought I was going to have 4 kids. I had all these plans that I realized I don't get to pick all the plans, right? But so went to school and decided against teaching, started taking accounting classes, and I had an aunt and uncle said, you'd be really good in sales. I'm like, sales? And right? It's got such a icky connotation to it, right?
What are you saying about me?
I know. No, because believe me, I had a career in sales. So I, was.
No, I mean, what's your aunt?
Right.
Like, what are you trying to say?
That's 100%. Well, she was in sales, so I couldn't say that to her,
Okay,
right?
yeah.
They were both in sales, but I was like, I don't know. I mean, they were like, major mentors, but still, I just kind of thought, well, I don't know that that's really what I want to do, So I started taking some accounting classes and did okay in accounting, but horrible. And then I took marketing. So I decided to go down the marketing route and I was working at Northwest Airlines at the time. I was working in reservation sales. And then I ended up from there getting promoted into a sales role. So, I guess they just sort of saw that future.
The marketing route ends up in sales.
Ended up in sales, right? So, got my undergrad in marketing, then, moved around, went from, Milwaukee to Memphis, Tennessee to Minneapolis, and was in headquarters doing, some technology rollouts for the sales teams, and then came back and started leading a sales team back here in Michigan, and then went through the merger with Delta and Northwest and ended up doing quite well, got promoted. So I was very fortunate to get a promotion. A lot of times, unfortunately, when they're bringing two teams together, people lose their jobs. So I got a role as a global sales leader, and it was a wild and crazy time. Just the airline business is a crazy time. I mean, when I went through training originally, they said, okay, every 6 months, first of all, they said, you're going to have to learn the F word, and that's flexibility. And so
I was on the edge of my seat.
I know. And because something will change every 6 months. And sure enough, that is like one crazy dynamic industry, from, changing of commissions and mergers and acquisitions, and unfortunately a plane crash, and actually 9/11, so bigger than just a plane crash, right? So went through that, went through pilot strikes, went through everything, just learned so much. But it was, working in a big company and growing up in that sales organization. And like I said, spending some time in headquarters with technology rollouts, and then coming out to lead a team, and then go through that merger. So it was a wild couple years, and fun, wild, little chaotic in some senses, because you learned, even though you're in the same industry using the same tools, the cultures are just so different. And, what I said, my word meant something different to them, right? And so I'm thinking, this guy seems really intelligent. I don't understand why he doesn't understand what I'm talking about. It's just because they use different words, right? So we went through that whole thing. So it was kind of going through the merger, learning my new team, and then also going through a joint venture with Air France and KLM. So I called it 3 full-time jobs. I was on, it was crazy, here, getting on planes, traveling around the world, a lot to Atlanta, jumping on team. We weren't Zooming then. So we had conference calls, but we weren't Zooming
live
then.
in person.
But I was going live in person a lot too, as I think we know Zoom's great, but person to person's always
absolutely.
It just rocks it out. But anyway, so, after 2 years, I loved it, but there was a really nice package, and I just decided it was time to keep boots on the ground and be focused. People were like, we never know when you're home. We don't, it's like, so a little bit of hit on your personal life too. But, so anyway, so I started the business, and, it took a little bit of time to figure out what I was going to do. It was, I wanted 2 things, which have kind of, again, hit me in the face again. I don't always get to choose everything, but I said, I'm going to stay away from sales because I really wanted to focus on that, because I got a master's in marketing. So I went on to get a master's degree in marketing, and all my experience was in sales. So I really wanted to focus on that marketing side, and I wanted to stay as far away from the airline industry as I could, because it was a great job. If I wanted to stay there, I would have stayed. It was, it was a great job. So anyway, so I went off. I started doing some things with the North American International Auto Show, working with some teams and some projects, and moved on to some other event-related things with like country living fairs, and really just started to build the company out. And, there's a lot of ups and downs with any business, and this one was no exception. So one of the things I missed was tools, really just diving into I'm a data data diver. I mean, I love to figure out problems, figure out trends, and from that aspect of it. And so I aligned myself with a marketing automation tool. It was SharpSpring, which has now been purchased by Constant Contact, and we're certified in them. So we do that work, but we also it's not one fits all, right? It's not a one fits all kind of system, because some of them are more dynamic than you need, and some of them are, depending on the business, right? So we've worked with a number of different systems, and so from there, just worked with many different clients, and one of my clients asked me to teach her son marketing. So I was like, well, I just kind of learned it again myself anyway. So it was a great opportunity. It was a 3-month engagement, and that's where I came up with our 9-step marketing program, and really have used that a lot. So I'm from 12 to 9, and I'll talk a little bit because we've actually taken it down to 5. But we then, every week I'd meet with them, and our goal was to put together a business plan for the company. And while that was, it was a successful endeavor, he didn't choose marketing as, it was more of a finance guy, and that was really his stick. And it was good for him because he was going to stay in the business, and it was good for him to understand the marketing roles. So that in itself led into a couple things, of course, because number one, I still have the 9-step. I took the 12, moved it down to 9, which we still use today. But I was also then hired on as their fractional marketing leader, right? And so that was before fractional was cool.
Yeah.
And it's super cool now. I mean, so
it just became a buzz within what? Maybe even last year?
Last year. And there's such a big in industry out of that, and the value that brings to companies, right? So you've got someone with, my kind of experience that a lot of companies are like, because you do some fractional too, right?
Absolutely.
So I mean, you've got some great talent here that maybe you couldn't afford on, number one, full time, or at the rates that we do because of the experience that we have, but you're able to do it fractionally. So it's fraction of the time. A lot of times that's perfectly fine for these companies, right? And then you're not paying the high level, executive strategy development for developing your social media post, right? Because that doesn't make sense. So
you're not teaching somebody brand new.
No, right? Because that's it. Because a lot of times these, I mean, I always say, they say, "Who's your perfect client?" I'm like, usually, it's there's been a couple of different scenarios, but usually it's somebody that the owner is still very involved in sales and marketing, and they figure it out because they've got a burning passion, right? They gotta figure it out. They gotta figure out whether they're doing it right or wrong. They've got, I shouldn't say wrong. There's no wrong, but doing it right or most efficient. How's that?
Yeah.
It's because they have that burning passion. They have to make it work, right? So when you're hiring somebody else in, they may not have that same drive and grit, because I'm going to use your words, right? So it's usually those people that say, okay, I really need to focus on other parts of my business, and I need somebody that can come in and develop a system, a process, our plan. How do we work through this? And so I've done that. I've worked in situations where they had a vacancy unexpectedly or whatever the reason, and I've jumped in, and year long commitment. Sometimes it can be shorter. It depends on what the project is, right? But this one particular one was a year long. I went in, I did my 9 steps directly for them. I was working with their team and came out with, okay, here's what we're going to do over the next year, whether you hire me or not to do them. But if we do, here's what needs to get done. This is what your team's going to do. Here's what I will do. And here's honestly what we need to outsource, because when you're looking at, a smaller, I don't say smaller company, but I came from Northwest and Delta Airlines. Like they had everything, in-house, so that's the other thing is, as a fractional, and even like you said, networking with other people. I mean, there's times when, I might need to pull someone in with me, and I want to know and trust that I've got somebody that I can work with.
Absolutely.
Or it's a different, I'll say a different discipline, because marketing is so all encompassing, right? And so there's so many things that you need to run it efficiently. And so, so we have got those connections and we work as a team. I've got a writer that I have used on a couple of accounts for over 4 years.
Wow.
They love her. They love her writing. It's perfect. If it's something smaller, I've got team that can do that, but she's top notch and we don't need it for everything. Right. So you just kind of find what you need. Right.
Yeah.
So we are also a full service marketing agency. And so we do, because again, we're going through, we're developing your plan and figuring out what you need. And I'm not trying to shove you in my compartment, right, of what I'm good at. You know what I mean? I would say what I'm good at, but we all have our talents because we look to see like, is this what you need? Then either it's something either we can fulfill, or if you have someone on your own, or we can, like you said, we can tap a huge network of proven good professionals that we trust too. So it's been a journey. So we've done the 9 steps as groups. We've actually done some through the chamber. We're going to have another one coming up here shortly. And, but we took it, we're doing it a little different because I've taken the 9 steps and drilled it down into 5, partially because the 9 steps was really, I would say, driven for a larger company, or in some cases, some of them already have some of the steps. And so we're going to start out with some of the basics of what you need. What's your unique value proposition? And if you're a solopreneur, that's really your branding, who you are and what your brand is. Right. Then it's diving into personas, really understanding that target audience.
Because then who are your people? Once you know who you are, who are your people? Yeah,
that's right. Who and where do you find them? And what are their challenges and what do they aspire to? And then, and then we'll go into this, I'll call it the system. It's what is your system? What is your process? How do you bring those leads in? How are you nurturing them? Because you can't just, you're not making a phone call, right? It's a process and it's consistent. And where does marketing start? And I'll say not end, because there's always a balance in there, but at what part are you doing the marketing and what part are you handing that off into sales hands, right? And is that a handoff completely, or is that a gentle handoff where you're both communicating, side by side? So we kind of go through that whole process, and we talk a lot about nurture. And again, where do you find them? So many people just want to jump into the lead gen, and it's like, you didn't do the foundation. So you don't want to spend all that money unless you're spending it with the right messaging in the right place so that you can hit the right people. And so we kind of walk through that whole process together, and then people can do it, for themselves in a cohort, right? Which is great, because then you're kind of learning and bouncing ideas off of other people, along with the guidance, obviously, of me and my team or whoever might be joining us. And then from there, or we've done it, we've gone into a company where we've worked with the leadership team and we did it together. So we've got many different ways which we roll it out, and just had one of our clients, one of the ones from that I mentioned just for 4 years ago. She did it 4 years ago. She was working it, and then she just said it was she has a marketing and sales background. She was leading salespeople, and she's like, I never really thought about it quite this way. And so it was really a great opportunity and very enlightening to them as well. So
that's so awesome.
It's awesome. It's just fun. It's fun to get into, like you said, really just helping people succeed at what they do, and sometimes it's just helping them think a little differently. I was in a brainstorming session it was like their beginning of the year power session, and they asked me to join them, which was very cool. And, they're talking about their challenges and what they want to overcome. And, I just, from me sitting on the outside, I said, oh, well, do you mean this instead? They're like, yeah, that's exactly the word. It's like, just because while every industry is a little different, every business is a little different, sometimes a lot of the challenges that you come across can be similar, or just having somebody sitting back is really what makes it able to kind of push forward. So it's just,
I love from that consulting end, from probably you see the same thing of when you come in you see things differently than the people that are inside that business, working it every day. You know, there are just things that are obvious that you're going to
Right.
see because you're walking in almost like a client. You can walk in
Yes.
from that objectivity of like, what is this communicating? What do I see?
Right. Well, that's true. I mean, there's times and there's time. There's businesses I just want to help
Yeah.
because I'm like, you don't understand, you know. I mean, and it's kind of funny because sort of the same thing. I'll go in if they say marketing, like, oh yeah, no, I do my marketing. I use such and such agency, which is really their online, a lot of their online presence, which is great. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like, but that's not the
What's your marketing plan? Facebook, YouTube, and
right,
Instagram.
exactly,
Yeah.
right.
What does that mean?
And some of those are great lead gen,
Yeah.
but what are you doing with
What are you
those
doing
leads
with it?
when you come in, right?
Yes.
Because I've seen like where people have an open house and I know they've spent a lot of money on it, and I can tell, number one, the people aren't positioned. You know what I mean? They're not asking the right questions. They're not connecting well with the with the people that are walking in. And frankly, I signed up and never got any follow-up communication.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
it's like, okay, I walked in those doors because something intrigued me to walk in. So all that lead gen was fantastic. But if you don't have the nurturing alongside of it, you know what I mean? Like from the time they walked in the door or even after,
Yep.
you kind of blew your budget because you're
did.
not, I mean, maybe you're going to get some. I always say there's in marketing, you've got your whole, right? So you've got 3% that are just ready to buy right now. There's 10% that you could probably, or I'm sorry, another 7 you could probably convince in a relatively short period of time. There's another 30%, right? Those are the ones you want to go after because there's another 30% that need you, but they just don't need it right now.
Yep.
Right? They
Yep.
don't even know that that's what they need. So those are the ones you're really trying to nurture for the long run. There's another 30% that, just maybe they might want you. You could maybe move some of them over, and then there's another 30%. They just either don't like you, or who knows, like you said, you're not good for everybody, but their brother-in-law could be in the business. I always use that as an example, and whether they might like you or not, they're still never going to use you. But the thing is there's, instead of the 3%, 3 to 10 that you're getting today, let's go for that extra 30%. And that's what we're doing through the nurturing program, and how are you nurturing them? Because where are they and how do you find them? And how are you connecting with those folks? But yeah, so you go in and you can see some of those things pretty quickly. I just had another conversation with one of my clients and we were talking about, kind of the strategy and what we're doing. I said, I look for problems, meaning like if we're not hitting our goals, right?
Yeah.
You gotta have a goal.
Yep.
And people are like, yeah, well, what do you do if you don't hit the goal, right? Well, if you don't hit the goal, what you're doing is you're looking to see why you're not hitting the goal. Where in our process or pipeline is it stuck?
Yep.
And if it's stuck there, let's figure out the problem. And the only thing you do is hypothesize on it and test and try and test till we can break that what's stopped there, right?
My favorite thing coming in is like seeing how many times that sales process gets stuck in that spot.
Yeah.
Like it gets stuck here every time, and all these people are just going to it's like the hole in the boat. All the air sucking out over here.
Right, and I'm like, people don't fill out forms. They want something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So because nobody wants to give up their email and we do this all the time. We're email marketers. We do it. It works. It really does work. But frankly, nobody's going to fill out those forms for absolutely no reason.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So we got to get to them. We got to get to them fast. That's the other thing. I just had another at the chamber event. I was talking to another one of our colleagues down the road, and he was sharing some of the same frustrations. We're bringing in these leads, and they're just not following up with them or following up fast enough. Right.
Yes.
So it's like those leads got to come in and they've got to be followed up. So what's broken in this process?
Well, let's use the expo as a great example. So
Yeah.
I have a couple of clients that have been coaching that had tables at the expo,
Yeah.
and part of the preparation process was, what's your desired result out of this?
That's
like
right.
you're working the table, great. You got some giveaways. You're all prepared there. You got your shirt, your new shirt. You got your tablecloth. You've got all that stuff. Now what? They're at your table. Now what? Because I've worked so many expos and vendor shows through my experience, and I've seen so many of them. I'd say 90% that go there, they meet a lot of people, and they do nothing with it.
That doesn't make sense, right?
It doesn't make any sense. Why'd you spend that time there? It gives you the warm and fuzzies, and maybe you have a conversation that is an instant like buy, or you get something out of it. Most of the time, you're going there, you're creating a lot of like momentum, a lot of energy, and then you let it die. You don't follow up with it within 24 to 48 hours. You know, like you get all these contacts and cards, and you do a drawing, and now what do you do with that stuff? Right. You know, I'd go into companies and they'd have a jar, their basket that they go to to expos, and I would open up the basket, and in the jar they have a jar in there, and all the leads that they had from the last event are still sitting
in their jar
their jar from like 6 months ago or a year ago.
All they did was pick out a name.
All they did was pick out a name. Right. That's not the reason.
That's not the reason you do the event. Absolutely not. That is that's part of the process. How are you collecting your leads?
Yep.
Is it a form on your website? Is it business cards from a networking event? Is it a raffle at an event? Right? I mean, there's many ways, right? But those are all choices. And
shout out for my client Carol Kramer. She was on a couple episodes ago, and I saw her after the event, and I was like, "How'd it go?" She's like, "I have 3 appointments set up, and I have these follow-ups," and she had it broken down into a science of hot lead, warm lead, cold lead, and understanding where she was at and who she's going to go after first, right? And but knowing there's a plan.
That's right. Yep, you got to know what you're there for and what you're doing, because it was interesting. So, and so through my process and development, right, of this system and going through and staying in marketing and not sales, it's like what happened was I kept dabbling in the sales process, because we'd bring in leads and then they're not following through, or because part of the process.
They think it's your fault.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's true. Right. When they're not doing this, it's like, well, they're not going to close themselves. You're not a widget. You know what I mean? Like, but it's.
I brought them to your door. Now you got to shoot them.
Right. Something. So, but anyway, so what happened was, as we were developing the process, right? So we'd be developing our full process, not just because we're bringing them to the door, but in general, what does happen, right? So when I'm working in, specifically when I was working in SharpSpring and implementing, not only was it, email sending and forms and all that stuff, but it had the CRM in it. So I had the pipeline. So I was helping them develop out their pipeline process, right? So we're developing. So I kept dabbling in sales. And, when I've worked with organizations that had strong sales leadership, of course I knew how to stay in my lane, but you want to be able to work together, right? Yep. You want to make sure that, I always said salespeople are the people you want to reach out to and tap to, because they know the market very well. If they're good at what they're doing, they're listening to the complaints. There's a lot of information that you could pull in from those salespeople, but anyway, so we ended up, dabbling in sales, and finally I decided, okay, I need to own it. Right. So now it's JCW Marketing and Sales. And I would say that's more, can you do a lot of coaching, and I would say I don't do a ton of coaching, not on the sales side so much. I do a little bit of it in general with some of my clients, when I'm seeing that they're maybe not following the same sales process, but a lot of times it's from developing what that process is. Like, how long should it sit in this, in this stage, and how often should we be reaching out to them? And then here's this, and how many times should we be making phone calls, right? Because what do they say? It's what the 12 touches is, it
takes like 12 touches to close a sale.
Right. Yeah. So it's like, so how are we doing that? Either is it in person? And it just drives me crazy. We're like, aren't those emails going out? And it's like, well, you still have to be making the phone calls.
Yep.
Probably a lot. And it depends on your product. It depends on your service. It depends, there's a lot of depends, right, on what it is and what makes sense in your company. But, at the end of the day, marketing isn't typically going to replace your sales organization. So you want to be able to make sure that follow up. So we did, I owned it, put that back on there. I had so many years of sales experience. It was silly for me to not have that. Yeah. To hide it and bring it in as a value proposition. So
I want to go back a second, because you mentioned working with the salesperson, working together as a team between marketing and sales. And that was the very first my very first introduction to you is I saw you on the
Yeah.
Chamber podcast,
Yeah.
and they put out a clip and you were talking about that very thing. And to me, I've worked in so many organizations, or I've come into organizations where the marketing team and the sales team are so dysfunctional. It's like a me versus them.
It is.
And so I was excited to meet you, and then got a chance to meet you a couple weeks later
Yeah.
at the marketing mashup. So
Yeah.
that's,
So it's kind of interesting because, and to be honest, when I was at the airline, in both cases, marketing and sales were different. I mean, there was the I'll call it the stuff that the marketing teams did, which was so encompassing because it's product, it's pricing, it's, all this, all these different departments, right? Because it's this vast organization. And then separately, there was the sales organization, and then the sales organization had a sales operations, which was a little bit like marketing for the sales team, meaning what kind of collateral do we need? If we're going to do an event, they would handle that. If you wanted to do a little newsletter, they would handle that. So still a very, I would say, in our organization from the airlines, that vice president of operations was right up there with the leaders of the organization, right? So, but in the kind of business we're working in, right, they still should be very closely aligned. Now, and Rob and I actually had that discussion, who's over what, because that always comes up. And I, had a conversation with a past client, because we do not see eye to eye necessarily on how that is. He's kind of running his marketing department like a sales operation, where the salespeople are leading, and no offense to salespeople, because I think they're very bright, but they're going to constantly ask for everything, and they'd be silly not to, right? I mean, they're like, if I can get you to get me this, get me that, make my job easier, right? But you need to have a strategy, right? You need to have sort of, here's the strategy, this is the stuff we're focused on, and if our strategy incorporates this aspect of it, and yes, probably your marketing people are creating collateral and content for your salespeople, but that's not, you know what I mean? It's still more of that either. And Rob and I both kind of said it's usually kind of marketing and then sales, I mean, a little bit, but I mean, it would be silly for marketing people not to tap into their salespeople, because they are so knowledgeable. I mean, I know, I was in the field. I remember and I might have said it in that last podcast, but we had some of our marketing people come out into the field. We would have these blitzes. We called them blitzes, and we would go into the cities where, not necessarily, sometimes it's where we were going to provide new service. Yeah. But so all the marketing people would come out, and this was their opportunity to get to see the clients. And I had one guy, and he was so bright, he's so brilliant. He's probably up there high in the company now, but he'd go, we arrange the schedule so it works out perfectly for them going from here to Detroit and back, and we're not getting the business. Can we figure out why? And I said, yeah, let's just ask the customer. Because he was out there, and he's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, let's just ask them. That's what we're doing. I build relationships with these people so that I can ask them. And they flat out knew right then, well, yeah, because and I don't remember what the answer was, what I mean? But for sure, you should be tapping into those salespeople, because the salespeople, number one, because they're having the conversations with the customer, or don't have a problem asking the customers, right? We had another situation come up, where we're seeing, the open rates of our emails kind of diving on a specific program. And I just said, well, and it was to their customers, and I said, well, let's find out who's not opening. And if you have a great relationship, ask them. Because what I think's happening is they're attending the webinar, and the emails are the follow-up to that webinar. Mm-hmm. So very possible they're like, okay, well, now I know that stuff's in there. I learned it. You know what I mean? Like I'm just guessing, right? Because a lot of times you find a problem and you're just developing a hypothesis, and then you got to go prove it, right? So.
And you're only guessing. You spend a lot of time guessing, and you could just call them.
Correct. Right. I mean, first of all, I looked at some common, technical things that could have gone wrong. You know what I mean? I would try to figure it out if it's something easy, because we did make one little change. So then we tried to fix that change. And then, we looked on the technical side of emails, because there's always things that are changing as to whether an email is deliverable or not. But yeah, so definitely, I mean, I just, and especially that's where the relationships are, is with those salespeople. So they're good. They have the relationships. It's what you want. And then you've got those customers that are great supporters. They'd be happy to tell you what it is, like, and we measure, and typically we're measuring pretty close out to the send. And maybe he's like, you know what, I saw that. I have it in a folder, so when I know I need it, I'm going to open it. Well, we miss that on our opens. You don't know what the real thing is. So you just got to go to the salespeople and ask questions, and they'll find out.
Because they're having the conversations
all the time.
And it's so much easier, again, than just sit and think of all the reasons why it could be possible. And we may be on. That may be the reason, but so many times we ask the actual customer and they give us a completely different answer.
Well, you'd be surprised, right? And it's yeah. And those are the relationships that you want to drive and hold. And I think the customer is probably happy to help.
Yes.
Right? They're so happy. And that's just building that relationship.
That's what I was going to say. It's another touch point. It's another reason to have a conversation with your client. It's another relationship building thing. It brings in that know, like, trust. And you're telling them, I trust you. What is your feedback?
Right. That's right. And so it's elevating it. It's very, very fun.
It's very fun. If we think of all the ways, how can we follow up with our clients, for example?
Right.
Like, how can we continue to stay top of mind or whatever? And you hear so much like just following up, just touching base, all these things, but why?
Why? Yeah. Yeah. How are you doing? How are you, how are things running for you, or what, anything I can help you with, or be problem solvers always.
Problem solvers always.
Always. Yeah. So, yeah. So we, moving forward, again, like I mentioned, we're going to be launching another one of our programs, probably the beginning of April, where people can join in. We do Zoom calls, for people to kind of go through our we're going to do it as a 5-step. We've got the 9 steps, but we're going to do it as the 5-step and really kind of walk through those as a baseline. If people want to learn a little bit more about some of our other steps, we'll make that available too.
Let's talk about the difference between the 5 steps and the 9 steps too.
Yep.
Like, because I think it's a bigger, larger scale company probably with the 9.
Probably, yeah. Because so I'll tell you what's different. So we, what I kind of skipped in the 5-step, the sections I took out was branding. When I went to the and branding's very important, it really is. I mean, there's a very important aspect of it. So it depends on the company, but we could take that as a one-off, you know what I mean? So, and a lot of the stuff that we do, well, in all reality, when we did the branding step, I actually was going to be going back to my client that I built it for, I was going to be out of town. And so I had asked a partner who did a lot of branding work to come in and teach that week session for me. And she was, big on the branding aspect of it. And I loved it because a lot of the things she had in it was stuff that they were learning in other steps. Right. So it's really, when you think about your brand, what's your brand promise? What's your company culture? There's so many pieces of it, I think, that are great, because people think of branding as your logo and your colors. Well, it's so much more than that, right? So much more than that. And it's a great session to go through. But when you're a smaller company, or you're a solopreneur, because we've done it, looked at it from that perspective, it's really you. You know what I mean? And that's your unique value.
What is shocking for people is that they have a brand, whether they realize it or not.
That's correct.
And whether you're a person, a small business, or a corporation, you have a brand.
That's right.
An individual person
has a brand.
It's a brand.
Yeah. Yep.
What are you known for?
Yeah. What is it that you do? And so I kind of took aspects of that brand and put it into that. For that, I'm going to call it the first step now, because I'm moving things around a little bit with it. But so that's the unique value proposition. So we touch on that piece. The other thing, another section I had, was key messaging, which had a very specific purpose, and that is to make sure within the organization people are in line with your brand, in line with the value proposition, in line with, what it is you do for whom, and what, just because you wanted to make sure those key messages were laid out. And it's important not only for people to be talking through it, but to be using that in a lot of the content that you purchase there, that you can produced down the road, right? So I pulled that one out because I felt like it was just to shorten it up a little bit. It's a lot of work. I mean, I'll tell you what, when you go through these programs, there's a lot of work. But
I remember you told me about
it's rewarding.
Somebody that went through the program was like, this was so much work.
Yeah, it was. So actually the one I was just talking about, she was saying it was so great. She's like, it was hard work. She's like, I was in sales, and I actually have that video up on my website. And she said, I was a sales and marketing leader. I just never thought about it this way, but it was definitely hard work. And that's what makes it valuable though, right? If it was that easy, then we would all have very successful businesses going through. It's really what you put into it. It's what's important. But so then I also, like I said, I pulled out the website piece from the 9-step. It's really part of the process. Again, depending on the company, and if people go through my 5 steps, they can add that website piece on, and then we go through the automation systemization process is really more encompassing of, kind of the how do the people come in? What are you doing with it? What's your marketing? Are you using a CRM/marketing automation system? What can you automate? So much you can automate, right? Not everything, but so much that you can automate. And then 9, I can't think if I got all the steps combined, but we do, we have lead gen, like where do you need to be to get those leads? And that stays in. And then I'm moving the goals. So part of the 12 step was we started with what are our goals, and we ended, how do we measure it? And I just lumped those together, but left it in the beginning, but didn't make sense in the beginning. So I'm moving it to the back end. So we can say, all right, now that we understand who we are, who we market to, what's our process, and then how are we going to, when we bring those leads in, if you kind of go in that order, right, backwards, it's backwards a little bit, but
it's reverse engineering. It is,
right? Reverse engineering, because you want to be ready.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to go to the conference and then not know what to do with those leads. Right. So
if you don't focus on even the leads and that kind of process part at the beginning, how do you come up with like the right goals and measurables? Because it should probably be tied to your process.
So I say, like, okay, if you're starting off at the beginning of the year saying, okay, here's when I think about building out a plan, I say, okay, here's where we are this year. Maybe we want to increase by X% next year. How are we going to do that? How did we get this year's? What worked? What didn't? What do we want to throw away? What are we going to refine? And what are we going to keep doing because it was awesome, Yep. But now we just upped it, So I had a client say, yeah, well, let's just double it. And I said, great. What are we going to double to do, to get the leads in? Because we got to, we've got to be able to bring those leads in, but where are you going to go to find them? So then you have to figure out, okay, so if I'm going to go to a conference, what's the budget I need to do it? So what do I need for that? What's the budget? And so my goal is what are my expected rate of return on that? Right? So how many leads do I need to bring in? And we should measure this. You should know. You should absolutely know how many leads you need to bring in so that you know what your close rate is.
Yep.
And that so you know what your outcome is. It should be very predictable. So if you're trying something new, you want to have a estimate, and frankly, maybe something is really successful to you, and it's costing you a fortune in time, money, whatever, right? Maybe you can find something else that you can save money. Then that also increases your return on your investment too, right? So it's looking at it from but that's what the planning session is all about. And then it's really, once you got your plan in place and you've got your process in place, then you go execute it, but you got to keep measuring. Is it working? Are you getting those leads? Are you converting those leads at the same level or better than last year or what you predicted they would be, right? So you've got to make some adjustments along the way. It's not always everybody. I go a little crazy when I hear people go, oh, and then we'll get into the whole AI thing, but like, oh my God, with AI, you just set it and forget it. It's like, no, that's so not. I mean, that's so
First
not.
off, I can tell. I can tell when you do that, but yeah.
I know, right? Well, not only that. Okay, I'll just tell you, I had a little euchre party. I don't want to call it a tournament. But, I had a euchre party at my house, and I went and asked Copilot to generate me, a euchre, which is a very analytical thing. It should have been able to do it, right? Just come up with my rotation for my euchre. It was wrong. You know what I mean? So I tried it. It was wrong. It doubled up the people. It's, it's a great tool, right? But it's not, no matter what you do, you have to build your system. You have to test it. You have to go through that process and use tools. I don't use AI, but use it as a tool, not as a be all end all. And you have to keep measuring and adjusting because things constantly change. And
I want to go back to that just to help reverberate for people listening. Using that expo as an example, it was $100 a table to get a table at this event, right?
Yep.
So many people pay that $100 and they'll pay it again next year and next year. And even if the price goes up, they'll pay it just because they're a part of it, right?
Yeah.
But how do you know if you get your return on investment?
Because
So you pay that $100. How many of your widgets or services do you need to sell in order to make that? Let's say you make $100 for one customer.
Right. So you need
at least one to break even.
Well, but then there's your time, but whatever, you know what I mean? But I mean, you do have to consider all that stuff. If you gave a giveaway, you got to put that in there, right? If you have employees working there, you've got their time that you're paying for it. So you have to look at all those things, right? And then if you get one customer that covers that, that's great. But I would, and you did get, so there's a couple other things that you could say softly, like, everything is numbers based, but you are getting your name out there.
Yes.
So that people, the more people see your name over and over again, the better recognition, the more they're going to like you. It's just natural, right?
Yep.
You're also going and you're helping support the local chamber, right? So that's also a great thing, and supporting local business because the local chamber supports this local business. So there's that, I'll say, goodwill, whether it's for your company, community, whatever it is, that part's in there as well. But yes, what do you need to do to get that one to pay it off? And then what do you do to make that a profitable venture?
Yeah.
Right.
And then how do you know, and getting down into the science of things, what events should you do more of, and which events should you cut out for the next year?
I to be honest, when I came up, and we'll get into this probably, I don't know how much more time we have left, but I didn't know exactly what this expo, because it's my first time participating. Was it the first time that event happened?
It's the first time since before COVID.
Right. Okay.
I remember I went to an event before COVID, and I was like, have they had one since? And they had not.
Right. So I have not participated in one before, and it looked like it was a little bit more because I think it was business and outside Oasis Expo, right? So I just wasn't sure that the audience was going to be right, but I knew there would be enough local people, I would go around to I collected a lot of stuff from going and visiting those booths and talking to those owners, and I'm going to have some follow-up that is going to happen from those, right?
Yes.
So I'm going to do that, but I wasn't really sure. So when I did it, I brought in another component, which is a little, this is the other business I started that I said I'm staying away from travel, and here everything I said is just wrong. I don't know. No, I'm only kidding. So I did that. So just because I'm like, well, I mean, not that $100 wasn't bad. I didn't mind doing it. I just wasn't sure if it was really the right place for me to be.
Yeah.
To answer your question.
Yep.
And so then I brought in this other piece of it to say, well, they're either business owners where this can help, or maybe they're just consumers and they want to go travel to Malta, right? So I just did it as an extra added benefit of us being out there. That way we could talk to anybody that might stop by our booth, because one of those things would be of interest no matter who came in.
Well, and what I'll add on top of that is, we've been getting to know each other since, for the last several months. And that's another element of your personality or of who you are that I didn't know about. And so that's even cool, I think, for people as they're coming out and getting to know you. You're already launching something that here's a personal thing about me, and a personal thing that lights my fire, and you can do this too.
Yeah. So it is interesting. So remember I said when I left the airline business, I was going to stay away from travel and sales. So far sales, we knocked that one out. I added it in. A few years back, at a family function, I had one of my cousins, my mom was born in Malta. So she was born and she came over in 1952 on a boat, and, not just a rowboat. It was but she so anyway, so my cousin, his dad is her brother, and said, well, I'll never get to Malta unless Cheryl takes us, because of course my experience in the airline industry. So fast forward, I was on Facebook and I was targeted for targeted for a Facebook ad, and I click on it and I'm like, okay, I'm going to see what they do in this marketing. And so I, clicked in, just a little bit of research, and I was targeted because of my travel background, and it was for travel agencies. So I'm like, I'm just going to sign up for it and see what they do. It was like $100, like whatever, it's fine. So anyway, I had to make up a business. So kind of what my cousin said, I had a dream, like I started a travel business to Malta, and then I'm like, okay, this is going to be my makeup business as I go through this. Well, one thing led to another, and I did it. I mean, I just ended up putting together. I flew out to Malta. I have family there still. Met with some local tour operators and found a business partner that I'm very comfortable with, and we started putting groups together for people that want to go to Malta. So it's a very unique destination. Either A, because you have a Maltese background, someone that's Maltese, or you've traveled around to all the, common locations that you want to try something new and different. And Malta is just an amazing little island in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. It's beautiful. It's about 60 miles south of Sicily. It's got over 7,000 years of history. There's a lot of archaeological things to see there. There's a lot of wars that happen because it's in the middle of the Mediterranean. There was a lot of attacks they had to fight off. The history, the Maltese people are pretty rugged and tough. Hence, I guess maybe my determination to keep trying to make things work. But there's beautiful blue waters. A lot of movies are filmed there. It's very hospitable people, some cool. Unique food. It's a little bit of a cross between Italian and, Lebanese, maybe the Mediterranean stuff. There's a lot of obviously seafood just because you're in the middle of the ocean.
You're in the middle of the ocean,
yeah. So it's there, but yeah, so we, and I had, one of our first groups that we took was my uncle got married. And so he was like, oh, and I said, hey, I was in the middle of putting together this tour. And I said, hey, how about this? And he goes, oh my God, this is great. Let's do it. So it was my largest group. It was bigger than I wanted them to be. It got up to I think close to 40 people, which was fine. It was fine, but it was my family. So, remember I said stubborn, whatever, it fit. It was good that we had a good time. And so anyway, so that was really sort of the launch. And we've put together the groups. We've helped people that want to just go there individually. So I've got a gentleman that I booked last year. He was there for a month and then helped his kids and friends that came to visit. So we got him a villa. This year he's going for, I think, 5 or 6 weeks. And so we got him someplace a little bit closer in to where he would walk around, he wants to be closer to the church. So there's 365 churches on the island of Malta. St. Paul, it landed, if people are, following the Bible, he actually, landed in 3 months. They shipwrecked on Malta. And so I have 2 signature tours. One's the Malta Experience Tour, and then the other one is the Footsteps of St. Paul.
Wow.
It's really just talking about, kind of what he, kind of visiting the places and stuff where they believe the ship landed, and then some of the other things cool. And where he lived, and it's really very cool.
I love history and stuff like that, so that sounds really awesome.
It's funny because I hated history when I was in school, and now I think it's fascinating. Right? But
it's funny that things I've talked about this on the podcast several times now, but the things that we have to do when it's school. Right. Versus when we get out and we can form our own things, there's own reasons behind it.
Right.
I sucked at math, or I felt like I was horrible at math. I didn't have any interest in it. I always said I was horrible at math, but at the same time, I was really obsessed with sports, and I would sit with baseball cards, and I I could figure out averages.
Oh,
and
yeah, right. Which is math.
With this math, right? Like a guy could like get a hit and I would calculate in my head what his average would move up to or down to or whatever, depending. And so like I could do that, but nobody came along and said, you know what you're doing is math.
Right.
And I never really even realized it or put it together, as dumb as that sounds, until I was in business and I'm like thriving on the numbers and figuring out the averages and doing the forecasting.
Right.
And it's like, oh yeah, I used to do this all the time.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking behind you right now. There's a little map up in the pictures behind your head, right?
Yes, yeah.
So I think in fifth grade, I kept failing a test on geography because I didn't care.
Yeah. Yep.
Right? Because I really didn't care. They wanted me to put all the countries and you know, in their little spot on the map, and I think, and I just was like, I didn't care. I just failed it, and I was like, and they wouldn't let me fail it. He kept saying, you got to keep taking it, and I'm like, okay, so I learned it, right? And then here it is, like, you know, I don't know how many years later, or whatever, when I was at the airline, and I had to know where all those countries were, and I was teaching it. Then I was teaching geography because it was something that was interesting, and you know what, that is so spot on, because even when that just reminds me when I was with my sales team and we had all the data, I remember that I talked about, and I was like, oh, maybe we can, you know, again, trying to solve a problem and going in and figuring, you know, out how to pull the data out so that we could kind of come up with a plan. And I remember my sales manager saying, how do you know all that? And I said, well, I know what goes in because I know that this is ticket data, right? That's going into the system. I know it's on a ticket, and this is what I want to extract out of it. And it's really because you care. It's anything you do. It's like when you care about something, you could do anything. I feel like, you know, and to that same sales rep, I said, my dad really wanted me to be an engineer. And so, and he was, you know, he was in design, right? So I had to take these design classes, and oh my God, I would take these pictures, you know, it's like they would say, what's the other side of this thing look like? I'm like, I don't know, what's wrong with this side? Like, I just didn't care. You know what I mean? It's
what's wrong with the side we're looking at? I don't know.
Like, I just, and he and my dad was like, oh, okay, forget it. Let's get you through this class. And this is not going to be what you're like. I can't even draw a straight line with a ruler, Dad. I mean, it's like, this is just not my thing. I mean, it did come back in later life again, because I had I was working with a friend in his business, and it was in manufacturing and stuff, and so I could read the prints and stuff, so that actually did come into play. So I learned something. I just wasn't going to do it, right?
Yeah.
So,
that's always helpful when it comes back and it helps you, though.
Right, it helps you along the way. So, yeah, but. Go ahead.
I want to go back, and I'm glad we just talked about kind of helps along the way, because it reminded me, it was going way back to the beginning of the story when you started working with the one guy, the son, right? And you said, I got two things out of it. You know, you learned you put together the 9 steps, and then the other thing was you started doing fractional sales afterwards, and I love
fractional marketing.
Marketing.
Yeah. That's okay. Yep, I can do fractional sales too.
Yes.
But it was really because I was a fractional marketer there. And then went on and
because back then, you know, like we talked about, fractional has really gotten to be a buzz term. But even a few years ago when I started it and I was going out, people would be like, "What's a fractional? What's fractional? What does that mean?"
They still don't always know.
They still don't always know.
Unfortunate, because it's such a great resource.
It is.
But, yeah.
So it's really cool, because I've learned as I've gone and I've taken action and I've started working with people and maybe not worried about if I have everything figured out.
Right.
That I figure things out as I go, and I've learned from my clients along the way, and I've gotten better, or I've like been able to pivot and adjust and make the product or the service better from what I've learned from actually doing.
Right.
And I think so many people get paralyzed with, oh my God, do I have it perfect? And what's really cool is that first one, you figured out these 9 steps that you still use to this day.
To this day, absolutely.
And how long ago was that? You've had your business for quite a while.
Yeah. So that probably went into effect in 2015 or 16. So the business has been going longer than that, but it was really, that was like I'll say a pivotal point that allowed me to have a process.
Yep.
Right? Because that is a process. Like I said, and I've used it so many different times along the way in different aspects, you know? So it's, so you did. I did every week. I was doing I knew how to put together plans. I mean, I knew how to put together plans from the beginning, from a very early, like it was just, I remember when I started in sales at Northwest Airlines, and I was just brand new, probably, I don't know, I'm pretty young compared to the team, because they had a lot of senior salespeople, whatever, and so they gave me, and they're like, okay, you want to put together your plan, which was your goals for the year, which was what your incentives were based off of, which is what your budget was based off of. And you had to say, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to accomplish. And here's what I need to do it. Right. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Blah, 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 blah. It seemed super easy to me. And I was told, I was told after that, well,
most people struggle
that's constantly with it, well, you were taught this. I'm like, well, I don't really remember being taught. Like, I didn't remember being taught that in school. Maybe I was, I'm not real sure, but
it probably falls into your natural strength.
It does. It falls into the natural strength. It's just because being able to see that vision and being able to sort of layer that in along the way, right? And layer in, here's what I need, here's what and it's kind of funny story that goes along with that is like, you'd get some tools, and I thought I would be saving money by not using the tools I had, right? It's like they'd give me collateral. I can upgrade people, and I'm like, I don't need that. I can just sell, you know what I mean? And my, and I was kind of like, well, no, you probably could even sell even more if you actually use some of it, So anyway, that's a side note, but so you're right. So movement creates activity, which creates, and you said something about that earlier today, right?
So motion creates emotion. Okay,
motion creates emotion, and it also creates just like that action and getting out there and being active. Because there's probably been many a times when I have, and I'm assuming you have, and I'm assuming almost every owner, like you almost are like, oh God, what do I do next?
Yep.
Like, what do I do next? How do I tackle this thing next? Well, if you sit there and dwell on it and try to make it perfect, that was I would say that was a little bit different in the culture, like difference even when I was at Northwest and Delta, and I grew up at Northwest, so I sort of grew up in that analysis stuff. But they always say sometimes analysis paralysis, right? And it was my strength, and I loved that, But the thing is, it's like you just got to keep moving, and you just got to keep moving forward, and you're probably going to make a mistake, and making mistakes is okay. We are human. We make mistakes. Just if you make one, learn from it. Right?
Were we talking in the beginning, like before we recorded, about when we make mistakes or when we have opportunities to reach out and correct? Or am I thinking of another conversation?
Maybe another conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it's one of those things of like some of my best clients have come from people that I've dropped the ball on, or I've, messed up or forgot to add something or something, that then they come back and it gives me an opportunity to then fix and correct a situation. Mm-hmm. So thinking about that in those times that you drop the ball, you learn a lesson, but then you also learn a lesson in how to communicate and work with your people. Because if you do that,
right,
you are already setting a difference, because most people hide their mistakes or they don't admit to them, and it gives you a chance to then
I know it's really honesty, right? It's just honesty and coming forward. And I'll tell you what, this weekend I went to see my my cousin's son play hockey, and they kind of got their butts handed to them. But
state championships, State championships.
I know it was just an exhibition game,
Okay.
But anyway, so there was they were losing pretty poorly, and but they came in and they got a shot. Well, the ref said, they didn't. It was sitting out there not knowing if it was going to be called. Well, the goalie on the other side, he came forward. He goes, "No, it was in." And it's like, good for him, because that's honesty, right? The honesty is going to get you a lot farther. You make a mistake, just admit it.
Yep.
Right? And just learn from it. There was a story I learned, and probably from a speaker a long time ago, and somebody made a very, very large kind of expensive mistake. And they went to the boss and said, well, you're going to fire me. He goes, are you kidding? He goes, I just paid a whole lot of money for training for you.
Yes.
It's like, so you better not, now you know more than anybody not to ever do that again. Right. So it's just, mistakes are opportunities to learn and grow from, and just own up to them. Like I not too long ago, I made a, kind of it was me / team member. It didn't matter because they're under my team. That's me. They made a mistake, and it looked like they were a client was blaming another another one of their vendors. It's like, that was us. That was us. Yep. So, we fixed it. I mean, it got fixed, and we fixed the process so that never happens again. Right. So, what
was the response when you owned up to it?
Well, it was all in email, so I couldn't really tell, but I think it had to give credibility. You know what I mean? Yep. Like it's just, people make mistakes, so that was one of the things when I was interviewing to go into sales. I was in reservations, and my first role was called industry sales or corporate sales, right? So industry was calling on the travel agencies, corporate was calling on corporate, right? So I was interviewing, not realizing, so here I think I've got these 2 interviews, and I'm interviewing with both of these people, not understanding that they're all on the same team and probably talking about the fact that they're both interviewing me. And I got the one on the industry side and the guy from the corporate who was probably this person's mentor, right? The other person's mentor. But he's like, you're probably going to learn a lot more. You're going to make mistakes. It's better to make mistakes on that side and grow into it, before you come into the corporate. So when I moved, so that's what I did. And then I ended up getting into corporate when I moved down to Memphis. But it's kind of funny because it was almost like giving me permission, not permission to make a mistake. Nobody wants you to make a mistake, but it's going to happen, Yep. So just do your best. And when it does happen, that's the point. Be honest about it and learn from it.
It's huge to have that mindset period, and when you join a company that they have that mindset as well, because we are going to make mistakes. This weekend, as me and my son play basketball in the mornings on Saturday morning, and he was driving. He's going to be 16 in April, so he's driving. Yeah. And on the way there, I had looked at the gas gauge because I'm like, we're going to need to stop and get gas before we go home because we play in Milford and we're in Brighton. So, anyways, we're talking on the way home. We get done. We're talking. Yeah. Get on the expressway, not even thinking about gas, and then we ran out of gas on the expressway. Oops. He's like, what's happening? It's like, oh, man. Good learning lesson for him.
That's right.
I was like, this is a learning lesson that I'm not always going to be in this car to remind you that you're out of gas. You're going to need to look at that gauge. You can't wait for somebody else to remind you. Right. You got to be looking at the gauge and have awareness of what's going on in the vehicle. That's or you're going to be on the side of the road running out of gas. And it was really cool is then his girlfriend was close to us, like down the street. And so he messaged her. She came, her and her mom came and brought us gas and even brought him a cinnamon roll. So he, like, I was proud of him. He like jumped into action and took care of it and stuff. Good. But again, it's a learning. And I said the same thing to his mom, or to his girlfriend's mom, is like, he learned a lesson today, and I'm sure he'll be constantly checking the gas gauge from now on.
That's right. Yeah. Cause otherwise he could be somewhere that it's not that convenient, right? This was close.
Where we were at, it's not convenient. It was lucky people were close to us because we're in the middle of the expressway, And usually people will stop. Nobody was stopping. So yeah.
Crazy. Well, it's the world we live in today a little bit,
Yeah. Yeah, but we learn from our mistakes. We learn from our action period, because it's not even necessarily with that first client or with that client were you making mistakes. You were learning through it and putting together a process.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we just got to make sure we don't ever do that again. I mean, will we make another mistake? Probably. You know what I mean? Like that, but not that one. So it's you just kind of got to go. That's part of the business, and in a sense, sometimes it's a little bit with I don't want to say it's mistakes, but like when you're working with marketing, you know what I mean. There's things that are proven. There's proven processes. There's proven things, but your own unique situation, you're doing a lot of, I like to say guessing. It's a little bit of, it's some educated guesses, right? Yeah. But you're doing something and you're testing something to see if it works. That's why I said when you build out that plan, what worked, what didn't, what can you tweak, and what do you want to try new? And keep trying something new. Just because you did something this way before, there might be new ways where it is going to be a little bit less expensive, to get those leads in. And you want to try it. You don't want to abandon what's working, but certainly look for, because things can change. Last week, was it last week? We had both Facebook and LinkedIn.
Oh yeah.
Right? Went down. What if they went away?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So what is it that you will do, if you are totally relying on that, that source as your lead generation, what are you going to do if that goes away? And you should have some contingency plans in place so that you're not just all of a sudden your business model tanked.
Yeah.
Right. So what can you do? We had, wasn't it, it was several years ago. Things are always changing, right? But so, I mean, everybody was like, they were stopping making their own websites because all they felt like they needed was just
Social
their
media.
Facebook page. Well, guess what? Facebook gets to control that page. Facebook gets to decide whether you're going to serve that page up or not.
Yep.
Right. But your website is your own. Your email list is your own. So you can reach out to that email list, even if Facebook or, because, these companies want them, they're business.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not a nonprofit, right? They're a for-profit business. They want to develop these things so that they can make more money and they're monetizing it. So you might end up having to pay for the services that they have, but what you want to make sure that at the end that your information is yours and that your, that page on LinkedIn or Facebook is not yours. It's LinkedIn's. It just happens to be branded for you,
Oh, for sure. And so like even a year or so ago, I don't know when I actually made the actual switch over to more Facebook than LinkedIn, but LinkedIn was always my platform. Uh-huh. I've gotten so much business out of it. I grew my following quite, it's decent. I always had a good traction on all my posts. And then over the course of that, of a year, everything got really spammy, like I'm getting my messages blown up with just like spam stuff.
Oh, I know, right.
And in the meantime, I'm posting stuff to Facebook, and then all of a sudden I've got to a level where Facebook is paying me to post stuff, right? And so all of a sudden that switches. I'm not using LinkedIn and then both of them crash, right?
Right.
Both of them in 2 days across the span, they crash and they switch up. But it's like having the diversity, because for me, the social media is almost a way to build those relationships with the people that I'm meeting.
Is.
Like I'm going out to the expo and then I'm connecting with people on there that are there on my social media, bringing them into my realm, and then they get to, whether if they engage, like and trust, build that.
Right. Yeah. No, people, when I look at the 9 steps, we said, well, yeah, you can pay for advertising on both LinkedIn and Facebook. I think Facebook's more common for that, right? But you can pay for that, but you can nurture.
Yes.
You're nurturing. That's what nurturing is nurturing that relationship. So once they've found you or you found them or whatever, just continuing to nurture them for the grow to the know, like, trust relationships, so that they, and whether it's from a marketing perspective to hand over to your sales person or team, or like for you, for me too, right? I mean, we've got very small businesses, so it's us, it's us. I mean, I've got a couple other team members that we work alongside me, but they're not as out there as I am, right? So the brand is really mine. I'm driving the brand. Yep, that's right.
Yep.
But it's kind of a wild and crazy ride a little bit, right? So just, I mean, it's kind of funny a little bit, but I had recently there was a post that was put together, and I have a new person on the team, and she put together the post about, doing business the old-fashioned way, which is really getting out there and networking, connecting with people.
Yep.
And the client didn't like it, which is fine. I get it. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, we don't want to be seen that way. It's a little bit of a brand positioning, right? But in reality, it is what's out there. People really people do business with people they know, like, and trust, and it's people. Businesses. If they, they may have heard, you might get bad reviews, and people are like, oh my God, if they get on social media, oh my God, that's the worst thing, because they're going to bash you from what you're doing, and your company's going to get a bad reputation too. Right. But it's really about it does drill down into the people.
It's all the people. People run businesses, and whether it's a corporation or a small business, it's at the end of the day, we're dealing with people. And I think you're talking about like different businesses and the common things they have. It's at the end of the day, the common thing is that It's a person at the other end.
It's a person at the other end. And yeah, and it goes back to even when you think about it from the people within your organization. If you take care of your people in your organization, those people are going to take care of your customers.
Absolutely.
And that's what's going to help you grow, right? I mean, just getting people on board, having a great culture, those are some of the things that we kind of go into the brand, when you really look at it from that aspect of it. It's like, what was the experience that person had when they're associating with your brand, whether it be on the phone, whether it be digitally, whether it be in person? What about your process? What, did you drop them?
Yeah.
Did you quit following up because you had so many, knock on wood, you had a lot of leads come in, but if you don't have a process, you can lose some of those folks, and that could be some dollars out.
Absolutely.
Be disgruntled people, I mean, it's really a big,
If your operations isn't set to handle the business that you're marketing and selling
absolutely. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. That's another,
you could have a great sales team, a great marketing process, but then you can't fulfill the operations.
And then it's a mess. And I say that sometimes when I'll do these big marketing campaigns, I do get a little worried about that. I'll be like, okay, I mean, like, the worst thing would be is that we take in all these orders and you cannot handle them. Right. So I'd almost rather start a little slower to make sure the operation can handle some things. And then we can crank it up a little bit, then we can go through, because once you give that bad impression, it's hard to win that back.
It is.
I mean,
it's hard to win that back. And then also, again, you're dealing with people. And so your salespeople are out there. They're the ones that are the face to the clients, right, or to the prospect, and they're out there, to your point, making the promises. And salespeople will create things, right? But that's besides the point. But like, they're the ones out there, and so if an operations fails, it takes a chunk out of their confidence more and more and more every time.
Right.
I had a client I was working with, and in the owner and the two people at the top of the company wanted to blame everything on the salesperson.
Of course.
And I know that's a common thing. And a lot of times there's things that salesperson's not doing or whatever. They may be right in a lot of cases. In this particular case, they had a rock star salesperson that just every time they sold, she was selling something that then the client was coming back and being like, you told me these things were going to happen, and they're not. And so she's almost every client she's selling, they're coming back to her and like mad at her because she told them the XYZ, but XYZ is what she's supposed to be telling them. That's what operations is supposed to be doing.
Right. Yeah.
And, they didn't want to hear that from me or the salesperson, so they fired me. Like as a client, as a consultant, but it was like, it's the truth. And
but it's, because people would say sometimes too, right? The salesperson oversold that.
Yeah.
Right. And it happens. You just got to figure out but it sounded like that's exactly what she was supposed to say. And the operations
there was
didn't
no
hold
that she's
through.
overselling it. They wanted to kind of sweep under the rug that these bad things were happening.
No,
and
you can't
I'm like,
sweep under the rug.
You can't. And there's like, just sell anyways. And like, no, it's not. You have a person out there that is like, they want to serve their client. You have the right fit salesperson. They're not just out for the money. They want to take care of the client. And so they're service based. They're heart centered. They want to take care of them. They want to make money, but they want to take care of these people. And so now they're coming back and saying again, there's some pretty particular stories that were oh, kind of like bring some tears to your eyes as far as like things that they were let down on. How can I get on the phone and say, we're the best company, we're going to do X, Y, Z?
I was just going to say that you're deteriorating their own confidence in what they're selling. If they don't have the faith in what they're selling, they're not going to be able to sell. And that happens with even like solopreneurs that might be a little intimidated. They don't have that confidence in themselves, right? To be able to go out and sell. But that's also with the salespeople, because it's like, if they sell something, it's the brand of the company, but it's also their own personal brand, right? So they get out and they're like, oh yeah, look at all these bells and whistles. So it's not really in a salesperson's best interest to oversell something, right? Because it's going to come back bad on them, right?
Yes.
It's not going to work. They're not going to keep their job if they keep overselling, because it's going to only cause more problems within the company for the customer. And but for the company I see so many companies not wanting to deal with a specific problem. And the problem it's like Groundhog Day. I'm like, really?
All over. Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, this just keeps happening. Let's find and for many other people like you and I, we see the problem. They don't want to deal with that problem in that way. And it's unfortunate because
it'll keep happening over and over again.
And slowing them from probably hitting their goals.
And it causes turnover. It causes, like, how much money are you losing? Because you have to retrain a new person.
That's right. Because it's bad culture, bad, bad processes all the way around. Slow down, fix the problem, and grow appropriately so that you're not, you can't put stress on the operation either.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
You can't double if the operation isn't ready to double, so they work so closely
as a recommendation, I would have your salesperson, if they're understand operations, spend some time with operations.
Oh yeah, 100%.
One of the best sales guys I've worked with started in the company that he worked for in operations. He was in janitorial, and he started off cleaning the toilets and doing the things. And so when he got into business development, he was like, I'm like, one of your biggest strengths is you under-promise, over-deliver. Like, you tell them, I don't know if our operation is going to be able to get to that. Let me communicate. We'll do that, and he would always have like a really genuine conversation. He'd go back to operations, have a conversation, confirm whether they could do it. And then the client would know, all right, we got this. Is going to be done. This will be done. And it just, again, it set everyone up for success.
Right. That's right. So it's just, I within an organization, the more you can get the sales people, even the marketing, like I said, my experience when we said marketing people came out to the field, and I think they came out for a field day, I guess, you know what I mean? But it was educational for them.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, they learned a lot. I mean, we put together the process, and we just were blitzing, so a salesperson with a headquarters person, and we would do joint calls on all these clients to talk about whatever it was we were talking about. But that just cross training, not only are you building the relationships, because while you're building relationships with your clients, but if you're building relationships within your organization, it's going to be all the stronger.
It's
and
huge.
if you have a problem with those relationships within your organization, you need to fix it. Because unless it's fixed, you're going to continue to have the same problems over and over again.
We can't run our businesses like we run our politics.
That's right. That's right.
Everybody's got to be on the same team. We're all rowing in the same boat. And I unfortunately, and I've alluded to this between sales and marketing, but it's whether it's sales and operations or marketing and operations, like
customer
you see a lot of
service
times
or
my
whatever.
team, my department versus, it's not versus. We're all one company, all one mission.
We're all shooting for that same goal. And if you're not all in line trying to shoot, because everybody has a piece of it.
Yes.
Right? Sales needs to do their part. Marketing needs to do their part. Customer service needs to do their part. Operations needs to do their part. And if you're not all communicating and working towards that same goal, one broken link is detrimental, right? So
it really is. It really is. It can go backwards pretty quickly.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Yeah, we had, so one of the things that I do is I work with, I'm part of some groups of fractional leaders.
Yep.
And it's pretty exciting because I work with different people from HR to, sales, other sales, fractional sales leaders, and of course other marketing, CMOs or chief financial officers. And it's been great talking with folks. And I keep saying we need to have a conversation too to see, just to hit on that exactly. Like, how is this department impacted by this other department? Because they're not separate.
Yeah.
It's not. If, when I was in sales, if the airplanes didn't take off on time, right? People were starting to bail from us. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So so that means that people have to show up for work. They have to do their job. They got to be friendly, and things need to go, be safe, from the mechanics to, from the airline perspective. you have to do that. And in a smaller organization, I feel like it's even more amplified because you have a smaller group of people that you need to make sure that they're just well. And I'm not saying that everybody has to agree on everything, because that's probably not healthy either. You know, you don't want groupthink. We're like, oh, let's go this way, and it's, you know, the wrong way up the river, right? You know, but you have to be respectful. You have to be helpful. You know, and you can have some good, healthy debates. You know, I mean, that's good. I had some interns, and it was when I was working at the auto show, and it was kind of funny because I had this great kid, you know, working with me, and he was like, I think a friend of the company I was working with the auto show, right? And then I had my niece. You know, and so we were doing some work. They were actually at my house doing some work, and my niece was questioning something I was doing, and this young man, he was just like, oh, "You're going to question Cheryl?" And it's like, absolutely, she can. You know, 100%. And if I say no, and she still feels strongly about it, she can say it again. And then I have to take that into account, right? It can't always be my way all the time. It would be depleting them and their ambitions. Right. But there might be times when I say, you know what, I understand what you're saying. I'm going to pull the boss card this time. You know, I mean but I don't want them to stop doing that, because that's just what makes us all better.
Absolutely.
Everybody sees things a little differently. So,
well, again, they're in the front line. To go back to what you were talking about, the salespeople and building relationships with them, they're the ones communicating with the clients, right? And a lot of times, if your people are dealing with things that you don't see, they're doing these things, and so they have an insight that you don't have. Right.
That's right. I mean, if you have a business that has customer service too, ask them questions. What are the challenges? You know, what are the challenges they're overcoming? What are the, you know, and frankly, that's where you start. Fix some of those challenges, especially if they're repeating over and over again, right? Because then all that stuff that you're doing it's like, you think about it, then you've got a company that cares. Your salespeople see that, right? They build more confidence. You're able to focus on those things, but from the marketing aspect, again, all of that stuff will help you continue to ascend, you know, and have some great business. So.
Absolutely. So what's next for you?
What is next for me? What do you mean?
So what's coming up?
What's coming up? Oh, so coming up, we do have, starting in April, we're going to run another one of our classes. So for people that are interested, you can just go onto our website and you can learn a little bit more about them. I think, we've got we're going to continue to do some marketing mashups, that come through. I know you're
doing the one this month, though. I think it'll be out this week. If people be listening to it tomorrow or today.
So they'll be listening. Well, so the mashup itself is on the 20th.
Yep.
So
this episode will be out the 21st.
21st,
so,
right?
Yep.
Okay,
so
gotcha.
You're listening to it.
So
hopefully you were there last night.
Hopefully you were there last night. Yeah, it's a great event. If not, make sure you go to the next one, because I think Rob's going to do the next one. I think, which is another great. Always great to hear
Rob's
everybody. Awesome. Yeah. So make sure. So that's another event that's coming up, and I just say, if you got questions, here's the thing. I always offer a free consultation. Just came from one, just a little bit ago, and I'm excited. We're going to, we talked about some ideas. Sometimes I just talk about ideas and people go run with them, and that's fine.
Yep.
Just a great way to get to know each other. You'll end up on my mailing list. No, it's not bad. I don't bombard people, but I really like to give tips. Right. So, but if you got questions, just reach out, schedule some time. Happy to talk. And if it's, honestly, if I have a conversation with you and it's not something that I feel like is in our area of expertise, then by all means, I'm gonna pass on to somebody that it is. Because if there's one thing that I've learned in business, you really got to keep your focus. Have that actually happen today too, right? Or this weekend. I was brought an opportunity, and I just kind of looked at it and said, it's really not in our core focus. It's like, while I can do it, it's not core to what we do, and it's going to keep me being distracted. Right. So I want to do those things that I can make the biggest bang for my clients. And frankly, if I think you're better suited somewhere else, maybe your problem isn't marketing, it's in sales, and maybe it's more coaching or something that I feel like, while we might be able to do it, depending on what it is, there might be another opportunity for it. Or, maybe you really need, some, capital so that you can really start to develop something before you focus on your marketing. And maybe what you need is someone that's a fractional CFO or something of that nature, right? So there's a lot of different realms. So just having those conversations, so I welcome them. The more people, I love talking to people, one-on-one, and just, if I can give you a nugget, great. If it's something that we can help you go to build out, even more exciting.
That's awesome. And I've been saying this a lot lately, but if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for everything. And it's so easy to get distracted. There's so many things out there. There's so many new technologies that we talked about, AI and all these things. And you can really go down rabbit holes and lose your focus on what you're supposed to be doing, or the core pieces of your business, driving it forward. It can get really easy to get distracted if you don't have.
Yeah, that's right.
Core value.
I posted, sometimes we're problem solvers. So sometimes, and it's like, and if you've read the book, Traction, because I know you and I both talked about the EOS system and the process and that core focus. And, sometimes you'll talk to someone, this is a salesperson challenge all the time, because I think the good ones are really good problem solvers. And they're like, hey, why don't we do this? And it just keeps you running down these rabbit holes, right? And you just want, you just need to get your focus, get your plan, and stick to it, and keep down that measurement. And if it's something else, find someone to refer it to. So anyway.
I love how you said that, and it's a great way to kind of wrap this up. But I've said several times that salespeople are creative, or salespeople will create things. And, it's because they're problem solvers. And because it's, for me, there's so many times where I could see a clarity of like, oh, we could solve it by doing this. But what I did is created something that didn't exist. Like I saw some clarity of like how we could do this. Right. And I think a lot of times as salespeople, we want to solve a problem. And so we start creating things that isn't necessarily fall in line with what we actually do.
That's right. Well, right.
Or can do.
And it's like you could, it might be something that's super simple and it makes sense to implement it because it just made your process that much easier, right?
Yes.
Yeah. But if you're building widgets and this is, a robot, probably not going to be in your core focus, right? So you got to stay in where you have value that you can deliver. But so absolutely.
Cheryl, this has been an awesome conversation.
Great conversation.
Thanks for coming in.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been fun.
My absolute pleasure.